Welcome back. In this chapter, we're going to be talking about everything gear related, especially when it comes to lenses, camera bodies, filters, and even accessories. Now, all of these things aren't necessary, but they definitely make the job better. When I first started shooting time-lapse, I started off with the 5D Mark II with a 16-35 and a 50mm lens. That was it. And I built an entire career out of it. But what I really want to show to you is the versatility that comes with the different lens choices, as well as the different body types, as well as the different ND filter systems. So let's just get started and jump right in. First, let's talk about camera bodies. I'm a Sony shooter by nature. I love Sony, but at the same time, you can shoot whatever you want. You can do Nikon, you can do Canon, you can do Sony, you can do Fuji. Doesn't really matter. Most cameras nowadays have all the capabilities that every other camera has, which is perfect. We just want to make sure that the cameras that we have a very large dynamic range, anywhere between 13 to 15 stops. That's really going to be helpful when we go into post-production because we want to pull out all those beautiful midtones, highlights, and shadows. So to start off, I'm using my main camera is actually the Sony Alpha 1, which is my favorite time-lapse camera. It's a 50 megapixel camera, and it really packs a lot of punch, especially when it comes to both low light technology as well as high resolution. So because it's 50 megapixels, it's a little bit over 8K in sensor size, and this really allows me, when I get into post-production, to really draw from those imagery. And if I want to downsample to say 4K, I can do that easily and retain all the detail, and I can actually even move around in post and create really fun new compositions within the same frame that's in the 8K frame. The next thing we want to talk about is sensitivity. There are some cameras out there that are much better in lower ISOs. This is the Sony a7S III, and I absolutely love shooting the Astro with this because this really allows you to shoot at ultra high ISO, anywhere between 32,000 and even like 64,000 ISO. And it really allows you to capture that Milky Way ultra smooth and buttery, and it also does a really nice job of reducing the noise. But this is only a 12 megapixel camera, so you're really looking at only a 4K image at the max. So when it comes to choosing your camera body, you really have to think about, well, do I want more megapixels with resolution, or do I want to have more sensitivity with the ISO? And there's a middle ground between the two of those two. You can pick something like the Sony a7 IV, and that's going to be like a 36 megapixel camera, so that's like right in the middle of a 6K frame, a 6K resolution image. And at the same time, you can probably do anywhere between 3200 ISO to 6400 ISO without having a lot of noise in your image. Next, let's talk about lenses. Lens choice is one of those things that it really comes down to what the subject is that you're shooting. A lot of the times, for most of the time lapse that I do, I love to shoot ultra wide. That's why I really like choosing the 12 to 24 G Master, because that really gives me the range that I want. I can go ultra wide without getting that fisheye look, but then I can also bring it in a little bit and make it a little more graphical at 24mm. I will say there's definitely differences when it comes to how you shoot with different lenses, and I really do like the primes, the 24mm 1.4, the 14 1.8, and even like the 35 1.4. Those are all really great lenses. A 35mm is really nice because it really creates a much more graphical, much more flat looking shot. It doesn't necessarily have the widest effects, so if you're looking to capture a grand vista, 35mm might be a little too tight. But at the same time, if you're looking to punch in, say you're in a city scene, the 35mm to even 50mm can really create fun, interesting subjects. When it comes to shooting longer telephoto lenses, such like this, which is the 70-200, this is a much more niche thing. And I will say, like, if you're shooting landscape, maybe mountain tops, or if you're in the city and you're shooting tall buildings, you could use the 70-200. The thing you have to realize, though, with the 70-200 is, or anything that's really above 100mm, is vibration in the lens. So if you're on a tripod, and let's just say you're on a bridge or somewhere where there might be just a little bit of vibration, you're gonna see that in the shot. So I really recommend, if you are going to be using anything that's over 100mm, to make sure that your tripod is weighed down and that the camera itself is very sturdy. Because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of shake in your shot, and it can be fixable in post, but at the same time you really want to make the best possible image beforehand. And we'll get into that when we get to post-production. But really, I would say stick to wide-angle lenses. The 16-35 was my bread and butter when I first started, and I absolutely loved it. That's probably the sweet spot for all of the lenses. If you're able to shoot 16, and then if you want to push into 35, you can do that. And having a zoom is great because you can then change it and manipulate the scene as you want as you go. You don't necessarily have to switch out the lenses, and it can be really nice if you're just backpacking. So think about that when you're out shooting. If you're looking for lightweight options, I would say stick with zooms. If you're looking for just perfection, stick with primes. Now, one thing that's really important is making sure that you do have a fast lens. If you shoot at f4 or above, what's going to happen is you're going to see the sensor dust or any kind of debris that might be on your sensor. And that can be difficult to remove sometimes in post. So if you shoot at faster apertures, anywhere from f2 down to f1.2, you're really not going to have any of those issues. So if you don't clean your camera often, this can be a great way to kind of negate that issue, but if you clean your sensor, then you can shoot as high as an aperture that you want. When we get into talking about camera settings, I'll tell you why shooting at higher apertures isn't always the best. Now we're going to move on to filters, and ND filters are the most important thing when it comes to shooting time-lapse, because to create that beautiful motion blur, you're going to need to have some kind of ND filtration system, because especially if you're shooting in the day, you're going to need to bring down that light maybe 2, 3, or even 4 stops, and in some cases maybe even more. So it really just depends on the lighting situation that you're using. But when we talk about settings, we really want to make sure that we're shooting at least half of a second to 1 second for all of our shutter speeds. And that's because that's what's going to create that beautiful cinematic look. So to achieve that, we've got a ton of different options here, and there's really no one best option, but they each have their own little niche use. And quite honestly, I use them all at the same time, depending on what kind of situation I'm in. But what we'll start off with first is kind of like your classic matte box. When we're using cinema lenses or any lenses that have 112 millimeter diameter, I love to use my matte box here with a 2.1 ND, and that's just going to allow me to create really beautiful cinematic shots using cinema lenses. And the next most common one would be just your screw-on filters. And screw-on filters are great because they can allow you to obviously just leave the filter on the front element. You can then adjust it. If you have this as a variable ND, you can then change it. You can see how it's creating either brighter or darkness. And this is a graduated ND, which makes it great for landscape photography or time-lapse photography, because what we can do is we can actually set the grade at the top to be darker and then the grade at the bottom be lighter, and that's going to give us a balanced image between, let's just say, a sunset or a sunrise, and really create a really nice dynamic between those two. But I would really recommend investing in a few variable NDs. The wider the better, and you can plop those on with some step-down rings if you're using the 16 to 35, 24 to 70, anything in between. But these are really good go-to ones. The downside when you're using any kind of screw-on filter is that A, you could potentially get it locked onto your lens, and B, it does make it difficult to transfer between lenses if you're wanting to switch. So let's just say you're shooting at a 16 to 35, but you want to move over to a 50 or even 100 millimeter lens. It's probably not going to translate that well, and it's going to take some time. So to negate that, my next favorite thing to use would be internal clip-in filters. And these go directly over the sensor of your camera. And what's really nice about them is they come in a variable range of stops. You've got anywhere from 1 stop to 10 stops, depending on which ones you purchase. These are the case clip-in filters. Absolutely love them. And what you can do is you just set it into your sensor, you clip it in, and then basically you can put any lens you want on top of it, and it's going to have that ND filtration on it, which is wonderful. So if you're in a situation where you want to go from an ultra wide, say a 12 to 24, and then you want to switch over to a 24 prime or a 35 millimeter prime, you can do that without actually switching any of the filters. So that can be really beneficial, especially if you're in a situation where you need to change lenses quickly, or if you want to travel more lightly. This is probably the best way to go, because you're leaving the filter on the sensor. It makes it so much easier just to swap out lenses. The next best thing would be using the rear element filter, which, depending on what lenses you're using, that's most commonly found on the ultra-wide lenses, like the 14 millimeter 1.8 or even the 12 to 24. But these then are actually just really thin pieces of glass, and they just go right over the rear element of the lens. And again, it's very much like the clip-in for the sensor. You can actually leave these in the camera, which is great, and you can just swap it out if you want to put it on another camera. And they're really nice. They're not too terribly hard to put in, but at the same time, you do have to be careful, because you're going to be detaching your lens from the sensor, and then that leaves open your camera to receive dust as well as your lens. So you want to make sure that you're doing it in an environment that's not as dusty, or at least has a little bit of control to it. The next type of filter is actually really interesting, and it's something that I use to create really beautiful day to night sequences. But the caveat to this is you have to use 2 different lens types. So this is a E to EF adapter, and I actually use Canon mounts or cinema lens, EF cinema lenses, to put on this. But what this does is it actually has a built-in ND filter already implemented, And when we get to talking about how to do day to night sequences, this is great because if you want to create long shutter speeds in the day and in the night, all we have to do is basically ramp this during the day, and we can make it go from darker to lighter or lighter to darker. And that's going to give us that beautiful, 1 second or 2 second shutter speed during the day and at the night, and it creates a very seamless image. So this is a nifty little trick. I'll show you guys how to use that when we get to the day to night sequence. But overall, that pretty much does it for filtration. I will say that you should definitely invest in some kind of ND system, because you want to make sure that when you are out in the field that you are getting those beautiful motion blur lines and whatnot. But you really would just want to make sure that whatever you're shooting with can at least do half a second to a full second in broad daylight. The last two things are just accessories that you can have. If your camera doesn't have an internal intervalometer, what you can do is you can actually purchase one just like this. They're very cheap, somewhere between $20 to $30 at the most, and then all you have to do is plug it into your camera, and then that's going to give you the interval capabilities that will then translate to your camera, and you can create your time lapse that way. But most cameras, Sony, Canon, Nikon, they all come with built-in internal intervalometers, which is what we'll be talking about in the next chapter. But in case you just want to go old school, I still love using these. They're great. They work 100% of the time, and there are some added benefits to these, which we'll get into when we talk about camera settings. But for the most part, I've been sticking with using just the internal intervalometers inside my camera. The last accessory I want to talk about is how to create faster intervals. In the last chapter, I talked about how you could potentially do half-second or even faster intervals, and using a device like this, which is the LR Timelapse Pro Timer 3, this is going to allow you to connect it to your camera and actually have this fire the camera off in half seconds or even faster intervals. So if you're looking to do something very specialized, this is a tool that's going to allow you to do that and really make your life that much easier. So that's the breakdown for gear when it comes to camera, lenses, and filtration. You also want to make sure that you have a sturdy tripod. And a tripod really, it doesn't matter what brand or manufacturer you have, you just want to make sure that it's stable and that you have a ball head. And a ball head is great because it allows you to move the camera in such a way, so if you have to reposition the horizon or you just want to get a really nice angle, a ball head really allows you to do that. From here, we'll move on to the next chapter. Thanks for joining me.